The 49ers go into Tampa Bay and lose the game 30-19. But the loss of the game doesn't hurt as bad as the loss of Fred Warner. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast, 49ers post-game edition. Every week, we're talking about the same thing with this 49ers team. And they find ways to be competitive. They find ways to adjust. But this one feels different. The biggest news coming out of this game is Fred Warner. His season is over with a dislocated ankle, potentially broken. Kyle confirmed he needs season-ending surgery. So his timeline's yet to be determined, but definitely out the rest of the season. That was a tough blow, man. I mean, the 49ers are already the most banged up team in the NFL right now. They were going into the game. You've already lost Nick Bosa, one of your leaders on that defensive line, to a season-ending injury. You haven't had Brandon Ayuk all season. You really haven't had George Kittle all season. You know, Jawan Jennings is currently playing with 5 broken ribs, a high ankle sprain, and a low ankle sprain. I'd argue he shouldn't have played in this game either. There's injuries up and down. You got Malik Mustafa back, but it's going to take him some weeks to re-implement himself into the game and be in game shape. He didn't look great out there today. But all these other injuries, and the 49ers, the vibes were still high, right? Going into this game, the vibes were high. The 49ers were 4-1. They were atop the NFC West. They were atop the NFC with the Buccaneers. And Buccaneers were coming into this game, been injured as well, banged up on all sorts of fronts. And they had an exceptional game plan today. I thought Baker played out of his mind. I thought they were everything that is advertised as that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. But this injury to Fred Warner feels a lot different. And I think at this point, it shouldn't even be a conversation anymore about who the heartbeat, not just to the defense is, but the heartbeat to this team is. It's Fred Warner. He's the guy that after every 49ers win, you await that Dub City yell, that Dub City chant, right? He's the guy who brings the energy pregame, during the game, postgame. He's an exceptional leader. He's a guy who rallies his defensive front. He's a guy who pulls this team together and demands top-level play out of his team around him. And this is a tough blow for the 49ers. You saw it as they were walking off. Jennifer Lee Chan, she was out there talking about just what it looks like, what it feels like in that tunnel walking to the locker room. And guys were hanging their heads. Guys were obviously disgruntled with not just how the game went, but how the rest of the game after Fred Warner went. And I'll tell you this, from a physical standpoint, the 49ers are going to struggle with this loss of Fred Warner. He's as elite at the linebacker position as anybody in the NFL currently. I don't think it's a crazy argument to put him at number 1. And I don't think many people would argue that, right? From a leadership standpoint, this is the part that you almost feel a larger blow. And that's not to say that he's a better leader than he is a player, but his leadership skills are exceptional. They stand out at a completely different level with this 49ers team. And, one of the things that Jennifer Lee Chan also pointed out when talking about just the vibes of these guys, she was talking about the ownership group and, with Jed York and then with John Lynch and those guys coming out and seeing Fred after. And she said that it almost looked like Jed York had some tears in his eyes. I mean, this guy means a ton to this organization. So, I'm talking the first 5 minutes of this post game, not about the game, which was ugly in and of itself, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. But I'm spending the first 5 minutes talking about the importance of Fred Warner because it goes without being said, but it's also something that you can't just brush over and say, add him to the tally, add him to the tally. The 49ers need to find a way to get things done moving forward. No, this is different. This is a lot different. This changes the approach to this season now for the 49ers as you look at the rest of your schedule, you look at who you have available, who you have left. You look at some of these guys and the timelines for the guys coming out, and you're thinking, is there a reason to not necessarily rush them back, but, bring them back maybe sooner than you otherwise could? Does it now make sense to wait on guys like George Kittle until they are absolutely 110% ready to go? Does it make sense to wait on a guy like Brock Purdy? Does it make sense to wait on a guy like Brandon Ayuk, who has had essentially his entire knee rebuilt? These draw a lot of questions, and the approach to the season changes for the 49ers. How they're going to approach it, leaves to be said and seen. But one of the biggest keys for me going into the season was I wanted to see this be a rebuilding, retooling year. A year where you have all these youngsters who get to learn behind some of these legendary players in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and so on. And now, with all these young players, they're just forced to drink out of the fire hydrant, out of the fire hose, right? There's no buffer in there. There's no filter to help guide you and lead you. There is a lack of leadership on the field for the 49ers defensively and offensively too throughout the season, but definitely defensively now the rest of the season. And this is going to be now a season full of skillful young players who have to learn by trial of fire. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. I think if you have the option, you always want your leaders out there. You always want them to be the mentors, the guys who provide your guys with in-moment experience that is, you can't really trade that for anything. This approach changes now. And what the 49ers are going to do at the trade deadline changes as well. They were talking about potentially trading for an edge rusher. They checked availabilities on guys like Max Crosby, on Trey Hendrickson. So, really, they were looking to add pieces to help them make a bit of a run. That may shift now. It may not make sense to give up future value, say in draft picks, for a win now or a fill-in piece, a now fill-in piece to lead you through the rest of the season. Yes, the 49ers are tied atop the NFC West with Seattle and with the Rams now, but does it make sense to try and win this thing? Does it make sense to try and continue putting the pieces together, picking up pieces where you can, and stacking wins? So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll break that down as we learn more and we see more. Obviously, the trade deadline is coming up in just a few weeks. So we'll see kind of the approach here. But let's talk about the game. It was ugly. This was a C- performance for the team. Let's talk offensively. Offensively, the 49ers, again, struggled with rushing offense. They did have a few rushing plays that broke through a bit, utilizing Christian McCaffrey. But all in all, it wasn't smooth and easy flowing. Christian had 17 carries for 52 yards. That's an average of 3.2 or 3.3. They didn't use Brian Robinson at all in the run game. So what does his utilization look like, right? And actually, I don't even see him. Yeah, okay, he did. I was checking. I was like, I don't even know if he was out there. He was. He had 3 catches for 8 yards. Mac Jones was okay today. He wasn't great. And I think a lot of that, he saw a ton of pressure from an awesome scheme that Todd Bowles had for this game, set for this game. This 49ers offensive line is subpar. And that absolutely showed today when you look at the kind of pressure that Mac Jones saw throughout this entire game. The Buccaneers were able to get home on Mac Jones and sack him for a loss 6 times. This is already a Mac Jones who has an oblique injury. He has a knee injury that's going to take it through the rest of the season until he can rehab it and spend months off of it. So he's banged up. He can't escape the pocket. He can't run a ton. You saw him break on one of the runs, break the pocket and take off. And as he was running out of bounds, he almost couldn't stop properly. He couldn't put the brakes on properly because of that knee almost giving out on him. So Mac's playing banged up. Jawan Jennings is playing banged up. You already didn't have Ricky Pearsall. Again, no Brandon Ayuk, right? No George Kittle in the pass game. Now, on the note of George Kittle, potentially getting him back for next week against the Falcons. Again, does it make sense to bring him back? Is he actually ready? We'll see. We'll see how the 49ers handle that. But in the interim, and a guy, sneak peek, I'm giving my game ball to is Jake Tonjes. He has held it down since George Kittle went out in the first half of game 1 of the season. Jake Tonjes has been awesome. I think Luke Farrell stepped in really well. He's done good things as well, but Tonjes and just his ability to make catches, Tonjes in the way he's able to step in and not necessarily, you were never going to fill the shoes perfectly for a guy like George Kittle, right? That's also another Hall of Fame level player. You're not going to fill those shoes, but he stepped up in an extremely commendable way, in a way that allowed the 49ers to still utilize their scheme to an extent. And whether it breaks open or not, like it would otherwise with George Kittle, right, that's different. But he's been there, he's been available, he's been consistent, and he's been awesome. So you love to see that. But today, this 49ers offense struggled. They had 300 yards essentially through the air, but again, Mac Jones 2 picks. And that first pick on the first drive, a bit of a miscommunication on that play, and it was more so on Kendrick Bourne. Mac needed to get the ball out there where he did as well. Kendrick shouldn't have cut back towards the middle. It should have just been an out route based on the read of what the DB and how they were playing that. But nonetheless, throws a pick. Could have been a pick 6 if that guy just managed to stay on his feet. Wasn't able to. Bucs were able to convert on a touchdown early and have early momentum and swings from there. So, in the second interception was, you're desperate at that point. You're trying to make a play late in the game. You're down 8. You needed this shot. It's one of those situations that's like you're playing from behind. These things are going to happen. So, frustrating day offensively. Christian McCaffrey was, again, used and abused throughout this game. Again, 17 carries on the ground for 52 yards and 6 catches for 34 yards. So he comes up shy of his 100 total yard game, but he had a touchdown, rushing touchdown, first one of the season for the 49ers. Got that lid off. You know the lid they haven't taken off that is now an NFL record? 12 straight games, no interceptions. That dates back to last year. This was a pain point that going into last week that you wanted to pay attention to. Is like, can you get a takeaway? Can you be opportunistic? Upton Stout had an interception 2 games ago that was called back on a ticky-tack pass interference. There's been other interceptions that, ball just kind of jarred loose at the end. A couple, at least one more that was called back on a penalty. So it's unfortunate. Yes, the ball has landed in their hands, but at the same time, you've had other opportunities and you've just genuinely dropped them. You haven't been able to make that play. Fred Warner had a couple, a game or 2 ago. So that's frustrating. You haven't been able to take the ball away on a pass play. You've let a lot of quarterbacks feel pretty comfy going into a game and throughout a game. It's going to be hard to win, especially you see guys like last week and a Matt Stafford, who I'm sure felt a level of comfortness going into the game. Obviously that was different, but a guy like Baker Mayfield this week, who is an MVP candidate, arguably the leader in the MVP race right now, and he goes in and he wasn't, let me put it this way, through the air, he was consistent, he was a monster, he was a dog, but just him being out there, making plays with his legs, he had that 3rd and long, I think it was 3rd and 20, and he converted. Again, I don't think that happens with a Nick Bosa and a Fred Warner in there, but forcing missed tackles and getting all the way for a first down, and then that drive resulting, I believe, in a touchdown. Yeah, right after that, awesome bomb pass to his wide receiver that he otherwise wouldn't be throwing to if they had healthy receivers. So Baker did an exceptional job today, stepped up. He had 2 touchdowns and just made timely plays when he needed to. Mac Jones, banged up going into this game, struggled to find a rhythm throughout this game. Todd Bowles had an exceptional play plan or a scheme going into this game defensively. He showed a lot of blitz opportunities. You knew he was a pressure guy. He likes to bring the pressure. He showed a lot of blitz packages early in the first half and throughout the first half, and only brought the pressure one time in the first half. So mixing it up, and then in the second half, bringing that pressure and stacking those sacks and losses for play, losses of yards. So scheme wise from the Buccaneers, and the next man up for them was exceptional. And I think that, the Buccaneers were the better team going into this. As far as a coaching thing, that was the biggest question, right? Was Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh going to be able to dial up a scheme that once again saved the 49ers another week till they can try and get some health back? And I think this game might be different if Fred Warner never goes down. But we could do the if, ands, or buts all day long. The realistic part is he's down. The game shifts from there mentally, physically, and the result of the game is the Buccaneers getting a relatively comfy win at 30-19. So frustrating on the offensive side, and defensively, just the 49ers, after losing Fred, in the immediate drive, they were able to force a field goal or a punt, and then the next time it was a punt. So it was back-to-back drives where it's like, okay, they've sustained their level of aggressiveness. They've been able to get the Buccaneers off the field, and you're wondering at that point, is this sustainable to get through the rest of this game? Because the Buccaneers are going to take some shots. And then obviously things shifted from there. The Buccaneers were able to take advantage of the 49ers loss in the defensive end. So tough. It's a tough game. Tatum Bethune stepped up really well in place of Fred Warner. Again, you're similar to like a Nick Bosa, similar to like a George Kittle. You're not going to fill those shoes with one player. You're just not. But Tatum Bethune coming in, 10 tackles, 5 solo tackles, led the linebacker core and the defense in a big way there. And so I loved what I saw from him. He's going to get a game ball from me, just being able to come in and take some of that pressure off. You knew that linebacker position was never going to be filled, like I said, but have it not be as massive of a hole is something that you can kind of build off of. And I like Tatum Bethune. I think he's got a really good opportunity here the rest of the season to prove himself as a player. I liked him in training camp. I liked some of the things I saw from him in preseason. Obviously didn't win the job outright, but now he's got his opportunity. So that next man up mentality that this 49ers organization really prides themselves on at this point is going to be in full effect once again, especially with Tatum Bethune. So all eyes on Tatum. Pressure's not all on him, but from a career building standpoint, this is his opportunity. So loved what I saw from him. He gets a game ball. Now, interesting thing happened in this game between Juwan Jennings and Kyle Shanahan. Juwan Jennings and Kyle kind of had this heated, I'm going to call it a conversation, because not a lot has come out about this yet. And it was kind of reported that it could be based on how he only got one target in the first half. And not a lot of things were going his way. He comes out of halftime and there's a false start called on JJ. And then he gets called for a penalty on an illegal block that he's passed, 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. And so just some kind of weird and uncharacteristic moments from Juwan Jennings. And then butting heads in a way with Kyle Shanahan there. And afterward, Shanahan kind of held his play card over his mouth and was talking to Juwan in a much calmer fashion, right? But I think this is an emotional game. So before I know a lot of the details about this, and Juwan was asked about the situation, he said, you're going to have to ask Kyle. You're going to have to ask Kyle twice. So I think they're trying to keep it internalized for now and feel this out. We'll get a gauge on what it is. But there was a lot of emotions going through this team at that point. And you were struggling to find a rhythm offensively. Your defense was now, beaten and battered. They weren't able to get stops. So there was so much pressure on each and every play offensively and defensively. And when you could feel like you're doing your job and things just aren't going your way, things are being targeted towards you, I can see frustrations. So again, keep an eye on that. But I think a lot of it just has to do with the emotions of this game. Again, losing Fred Warner. He's your leader, not just defensively. He is the heartbeat of the 49ers franchise. And I think I can kind of put a lot of emphasis in that and put a lot of what happened in this game on just the overall loss of Fred Warner. So, I'm gonna wrap things up. I gave my game balls, right, and again I'll say it again. Their first game ball is going to Jake Tonjes, stepping up in an awesome way again with the loss of George Kittle. Second game ball is going to Tatum Bethune, stepping in really well for Fred Warner. Again, you're not going to fill either of these shoes, but you step in a big way. These are young guys who have an opportunity now to step in and develop a career for themselves. So I'm giving those two game balls. If I had to give a third ball, it would go to Eddy Pinero because again, just consistent stacking points in the opportunities long that he's had. And I mean long opportunities. He's been in the 50s pretty consistently and knocking those down. So it's nice to be able to rely on your kicker, especially when you look at like a Rams team who even today missed an absolute doinker from I think 27 yards out. And so just to know you don't have those kicker problems feels better, right? Not a lot of positives that come out of this game this week, and everything shifts now for the 49ers. And it's hard for me to be fired up about the rest of the season. It's hard for me to feel confident that this team can pull through. I think with the way this team is going now, again, you're looking at your young guys to just develop in the moment, in the heat of things, in the heat of the game. You don't have your leaders, a lot of your leaders defensively out there. The biggest leader, I think, for the 49ers on the defensive end that is out on the field consistently right now would be Diamador Lenore. And the secondary today wasn't good either. So this is going to be an interesting adjustment as the season goes, guys. But, man, this is tough. This is the last thing you wanted to happen. And, something interesting they brought up in the post game. Fred Warner, he's missed one game in his career in the 133 games that he's played. Last year, he played on a fractured ankle for pretty much the entire season. I think he sustained it against the Patriots early on. This dude is a guy who is a rock to your franchise. He's a guy who is consistently out there. He's consistently around the team. Now he's going to, miss the rest of the season. So this kind of puts it in perspective for you. You've had games without Nick Bosa, and you've adjusted to an extent. You've had other seasons without Nick Bosa. Let me put it this way. You've had games without a Deebo Samuel. You've had games without a George Kittle. Games without a Brandon Ayuk. Games without so many of these leaders, even Trent Williams, right? Now, you get a feel for what it's like to not have the heartbeat of your defense and the heartbeat of your team out there. This is going to require a lot of digging deep for this 49ers team as they adjust to how the rest of the season goes. I know Fred Warner is going to be around the team consistently and a part of every conversation that happens from a standpoint, a team standpoint, but it's so much different when your guy's not out there dogging it out with you every play, right? So things change. This season changes. Everything shifts now. The focus shifts. We'll see how the 49ers do. Again, they have a pretty easy schedule, so I think they're still going to find ways to win. This is, yes, a banged-up Buccaneers team, but a Buccaneers team that still has an MVP-style quarterback candidate right now who's playing at an exceptional level. They had Egbuka for a majority of the game before he went out. I can't even say majority. They had him for the first half of the game before he went out with that hamstring injury. And they had guys who stepped up in big ways. And that defensive scheme from the Buccaneers, while they're not an elite defense per se, they step up when it matters. They make plays when it matters, and they're opportunistic. This is a team who's going to be contending for a championship, and they're only going to get guys back. So you had an opportunity to still go down, tie this thing up late, and potentially make it dramatic. You gave yourself a chance to win. This is a contending team. This is arguably arguably the best team you're going to see for the rest of it. I think obviously you see the Rams, and you're going to see Seattle, which Seattle is a different team than what you saw week 1. I think even that Rams game is going to go a lot different now. Those are really the last 2 tough games on the schedule for the 49ers. So they could still find ways to win and find themselves contending for a playoff spot. But is there a point? And especially if the matchup isn't favorable, are you going to get a home field advantage? Is there a point if you're going to make that run, does it mean you have to force guys back earlier than you otherwise would want to? That doesn't make sense to do. In my eyes, I think you play out the next few weeks here. You only let a guy come back when he is basically 100%. Don't rush anything back. Let it play out through week 10 and see what the standings look like. And from there, at least, around week 8 when the trade deadline is, then shift. If you feel like this is a season that you gotta take a run at because, the Super Bowl's in Levi's Stadium at the end of it, so be it. Then you look at what your options are at the trade deadline. But it, in my opinion, it wouldn't make sense for them to, trade away future value for a win-now player when you're not in win-now mode. So we'll see how the 49ers approach this, guys. But frustrating loss. Actually, and that's the thing. It's not even the loss that's frustrating. You can live with this loss. Win or lose for the 49ers in this one, this was always going to be a devastating outcome based on what happened to Fred Warner. So prayers to Fred Warner. We hope his surgery goes well, and we hope his recovery goes really well. Man, to be a Niners fan right now, it is so tough. But they don't call us the faithful for nothing. We stick with this team through thick and thin. This is a team that 49ers, Bay Area people, everybody love. Like, this is a team we always rally behind. This is a team who has a lot of heart. And I'm curious to see how they handle the rest of the season. So we'll stick with you as always. And I'm going to stick with this team, of course, right? I'm not going to shift focus. The Eagles just had a tough loss as well. And Marcos and things are shifting here in the next couple of weeks. Our standard episodes are going to be, they're going to be different this week as it's going to be more clip focused. So follow us on YouTube so you can keep up with our clips there. And we're going to do like some short game analysis and breakdowns. Marcos is traveling this week. I'm traveling next week after that. And my opportunity to record is unlikely, very, very unlikely. So again, follow us on all our socials, especially on YouTube, subscribe here, because we're still going to be putting out some content and we're still going to be breaking down some pregame stuff going into each of the matchups. So as always, guys, I've been Benny the Jet Reds. You can hit us up on our email at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Again, like this video. If you guys, I know I tried to be as positive as I could, but I think the overall vibes are tough right now. So, shoot a like on this. Let me know what you guys feel. What are the thoughts? Do you think the 49ers, it makes sense for them to go on a run right now? Do you think it makes sense for them to just kind of evaluate things and let things play out here initially and go from there? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. And as always, guys, I appreciate you for listening. We'll see you soon. Peace.